Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Sulo Jahanath, and today I'm moderating the eighth Google Hangout session of the fifth fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 15 award winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking, as well as help us reveal the first mystery celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in the session. And if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project, just visit www.thepixelproject.net. Today, we have a very special guest to help us launch our campaign, a live discussion and Q&A session with best-selling author Jay Kristoff. Jay is the author of The Lotus War, a Japanese steampunk series. His first novel, the first novel of that series, Storm Dancer, was a finalist for a 2012 Aurealis Award and was also shortlisted for two 2013 David Gemmell Awards for Best Novel and Best Debut Novel, and was also a finalist for the 2013 Compton Crook Award. His Illuminae File, series has also been nominated and won several awards. His first book, Nevernight, which is in the adult epic fantasy Nevernight Chronicle series, has also earned him his second David Gemmell Awards nomination and won the 2016 Aurealis Award for Best Fantasy Novel. Jay has also generously donated some goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. So we got one Nevernight goodie bundle, which includes signed and personalized paperback editions of Nevernight and God's Grave. It also includes doodles alongside the signature and personalization, and one Nevernight bookmark. He's also given us one Illuminae goodie bundle with signed and personalized paperback editions of the whole Illuminae trilogy and one Jemina bookmark. And he's also given us one Lifelike goodie bundle, which includes one Lifelike first edition hardcover signed and personalized, and one set of 4 exclusive Lifelike bookmarks. All these goodies are available for US and Australia donors only. And just so you know, there's only one of every bundle, and each one has a modest donation request attached to it. So fulfill the donation request today, and Jay will give you the goodies. We'll send you the goodies. So please give generously. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. And if you're watching the session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Jay questions live. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And Sharmila, who is our fantastic producer today and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Jay to answer. We're very techy. And now over to Jay, who's going to read an excerpt from Nevernight. And a quick note before Jay begins. The passage that Jay has selected for today's reading is relevant to the topics we'll be discussing today, but contains some very strong language. If you prefer not to hear such language, feel free to go get a cup of tea or coffee and come back in about 10 minutes' time. Now I'm going to pass this over to our author, Jay.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, there is some curse words in this. Hopefully it's relevant to the topic at hand. This is a pretty infamous scene, I guess, from the first Nevernight book. This was actually the scene that started the entire book in my head. It began as an argument that I saw between a couple of lady friends of mine on New Year's Eve, as it so happens, and that got me thinking about this particular discussion, and that thought turned into a scene, and that scene turned into a book. But I'll start reading. I'm not the best reader in the world, but we'll see how we go, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So Mia exhaled, her eyes narrowed. She reached out to Mr. Kindly as if to pet him, fingers passing through him as if he were smoke. In all truth, there were few who'd seen her work her gift and lived to tell the tale. Folk of the Republic feared what they didn't understand, and hated what they feared. And yet this boy seemed more intrigued than afraid. Looking him up and down, this half-pint Dwameri, with his Islander tattoos and mainlander's name, She realized he was an outsider too, and it briefly dawned on her how glad she was to find herself in his company on this strange and dusty road. "And what do you know about the darkened, Don Trick?" she asked. "Folklore," he replied. "Bullshit. You steal babies from their cribs and deflower virgins where you work and other rot. I heard tell Darkin attacked the Basilica Grand a few years back, killed a whole mess of Illuminati legionnaires." "Ah," Mia smiled around her smoke. "The True Dark Massacre." "Probably more horseshit they cooked up to raise taxes or such like," he said. "Probably," Mia waved to her shadow. "Still, you don't seem unnerved by it." Trick shrugged. "I knew a seer who could ken the future by rummaging in animal guts. I met an alchemist who could make fire from dust and kill a man just by breathing on him. Messing about with the dark seemed just another kind of huckster thaumaturgy to me." He glanced up to the cloudless sky. "And I can't see much use for it in a place where the sun's almost never set." "The brighter the light, the deeper the shadows," came a whisper. Trick looked to the knot cat, obviously surprised to hear it speak. He watched it carefully for a moment as if it might sprout a new head or breathe black flame. With no show of multiple heads forthcoming, the boy turned his eyes back to Mia. "Where do you get the gift from?" he asked. "Your mother? Your father?" "I don't know where I got it," she replied, "and I've never met another like myself to ask. My Shahid said I was touched by the mother, whatever that means. He surely didn't seem to know." The boy shrugged, ran his thumb over the sigil on her cigarillo box. "If memory serves, the familiar Corvair was involved in some trouble a few True Darks back. Something about king-making. Never flinch, never fear," Mia sighed, "and never ever forget." "So, the puzzle begins to make sense," he said. "The last daughter of a disgraced familiar, headed to the finest school of killers in the Republic, planning on settling scores after your graduation?" Mia sighed. "You're not about to regale me with some wisdom on the futility of revenge, are you? Because I was just starting to like you." "Oh no," Trick smiled. "Vengeance I understand. But given the wrong that you're set on righting, I'm fancying your targets are going to be tricky to hit." "One mark is already in the ledger," she patted her purse of teeth. "3 more to come." "Do these walking corpses have names?" he asked. "The first is Francesco Duomo." "The Francesco Duomo," he said. "Grand Cardinal of the Church of the Light?" "That'd be him," she nodded. "The second is Marcus Remus, Justicus of the Illuminati Legion." "And the third?" he asked. The sun gleamed in Mia's eyes. Wisps of long dark hair caught at the edges of her mouth. The shadows around her swayed like oceans, rippling near Trick's toes. Twice as dark as they should have been. Almost as dark as her mood had become. "Consul Julius Scaver," she said. "4 daughters," Trick breathed. "That's why you seek training at the church." Mia nodded. "A sharp knife might kill Duomo or Remus with a lot of luck. But it's not going to be some gutter snipe with a shiv that ends Scaver. Not after the massacre. He doesn't climb into bed without a cadre of Illuminati there to check between the sheets first." "The most powerful man in the entire Republic," the boy shook his head. "You know how to make it hard on yourself, pale daughter." "Oh, aye," she nodded. "He's as dangerous as a sack of black mark vipers. A right cunt and no mistake." The boy raised his eyebrows, mouth slightly agape. Mia met his stare with a scowl. "What?" "My mother said that's a filthy word," he frowned. "The filthiest. She told me never to say it, especially not in front of ladies." "Oh, really?" The girl took another pull on her cigarillo with her eyes narrowed. "And why's that?" "I don't know," Trick found himself mumbling. "It's just what she said." Mia shook her head, crooked bangs swaying before her eyes. "You know, I've never understood that. How being named for a woman's nethers is somehow more grievous than any other insult. Seems to me calling someone after a man's privates is worse. I mean, what do you picture when you hear a fellow called a cock?" Trick shrugged, befuddled at the strange turn in conversation. "You imagine an oaf, don't you?" Mia continued. "Someone so full of wank there's no room for wits. A slow-minded bastard who struts around full of spunk and piss, completely ignorant of how he looks to others. Cock is just another word for fool, but you call someone a cunt, well..." The girl smiled. "You're implying a sense of malice there, an intent, malevolent and self-aware. Don't think I named Consul Scaver a cunt to gift him insult. Cunts have brains, Don Trick. Cunts have teeth. Someone calls you a cunt, you take it as a compliment, a sign that folks believe you're not to be lightly fucked with." She shrugged. "I think they call that irony." Sniffing, Mia stared out at the waste laid below them. "The truth is, there's no difference between your nethers and mine, aside from the obvious, of course. but one doesn't carry any more weight than the other. Why should what's between my legs be considered any smarter or stupider, any worse or better? It's all just meat, Don Trick. In the end, it's all just food for worms, just like Duomo, Remus, and Sceva will be. She took one last drag, long and deep, as if drawing the very life from her smoke. But I'd still rather be called a cunt than a cock any turn. The girl sighed grey, crushed her cigarillo out with her boot heel, and spat into the wind. And just like that, young Trick was in love. That's it.
Thank you very much, Jay. I'm not sure why you said you're not a good reader, because that was very interesting. I don't know if you saw me giggling away. I muted my microphone, so But yes, so just so you know, we actually have 7 viewers at the moment. So
Okay.
yay!
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Before I move on to just a post-reading discussion with Jay, I'd just like to acknowledge that a couple of your goodies have already been snapped up, Jay. With the Doodle Nevernight goodie bundle has been snapped up by Eleanor Goodlett. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Eleanor. Thank you very much. And a long-time Read for Pixels community member, Brianna Avery, has snapped up your Illuminate goodie bundle. So we only have your Lifelike goodie bundle left. So yay! That's awesome. So if you're okay, we'll just move on to the discussion portion of it. Fantastic. The first one, as you know, Read for Pixels and Pixel Project is all about fighting violence against women and empowering women. So my first question to you is about your books, which feature plenty of female protagonists like Mia, who are complex characters with agency, at the same time are very human and flawed. So what or who are your inspirations for your female characters?
I mean, Mia is probably, she's a combination of a lot of women that I've known over the years. I mean, I try not to draw direct inspiration from any one person, because if you're writing about your friend, for example, or basing a character off your friend and it becomes too obvious, then if horrible things start happening to that character, or that character starts doing horrible things, you might not stay friends. But I don't have any one particular person that Mia was a basis for, but I mean, there are parts of my mother in her. There are parts of both of my sisters in her. I think I dedicated Nevernight to both of my sisters. My wife, I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of amazing women. Grew up with 2 sisters, and they've been an incredibly powerful and positive influence on my life. So yeah, I hope that no one considers Mia a role model, because she's a pretty bad person at the end of the day. She's pretty self-centered and she does some pretty awful things. But like you say, I try and make her complex. I tried not to make her a stereotype or a cardboard cutout. I wanted readers to question why they liked her. Hopefully she is likable, but there are many reasons why she shouldn't be. So yeah, she was a really interesting exercise in constructing.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting things about how you've written Mia, simply because I liked her, and
good.
Like you pointed out, I didn't understand why I liked her, because she does do some horrible things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that's what makes her so relatable, is that all of us at some point in our life, maybe not as horrible as some of the things Mia did, but we do horrible things, and it makes us but that's what makes us very human and flawed. So for me, I found her quite relatable. Like, you can kind of understand where she's coming from. You might not agree with it, but you can kind of understand.
Yeah, I mean, she's ultimately motivated by vengeance. She wants revenge upon the people that hurt her, and revenge is a pretty selfish motivation. But because we've all been wronged in our life, because we've all experienced some form of injustice, I think it's pretty easy to sympathize with someone who's trying to right a wrong.
That's right.
And there's something intriguing about outlaws and anti-heroes as well.
That's right.
People who kind of step outside the boundaries of justice and society and decide that their goals are more important than anything that society and being a part of it can offer. So a lot of us think about that, but not a lot of us have the courage to do it. So when we see a character doing it, that's kind of aspirational, I guess.
That's true. Funnily enough, I was having a discussion about anti-heroes last night, and we had this pretty much the same thing. Step outside justice, the justice system, to take matters into your own hands because you don't believe in the justice system, and again, you're
Yeah.
driven by the need for vengeance or to right a wrong that you see is only you can fix.
Yeah, but
So
it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean,
that's right.
we all, I'm sure we all imagine doing it, but
To
someone
actually
actually
do it.
takes that step, yeah, it's
That's
very,
right.
very hard. There's a lot of inertia built into this constructs in which we live, so breaking
Mm,
away from that can be very, very difficult, which I think is why when we see characters who do it, we like them instinctively.
yeah,
Like
because
Sons
we
of
feel that.
Anarchy. I'm not sure if you've ever watched that television show, Sons of Anarchy. It's
Oh
a
yeah,
program full of just awful human beings. They're just the
that's true.
worst.
Yeah,
They're the murderers and drug dealers, gun runners, but you still kind of like them because they're outlaws. I don't know. It's very strange.
that's true. I agree completely. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next portion of the question. It's still about Mia.
Hmm.
So, Mia is someone who's very complex and flawed, yet she's strong enough to survive the rigors of her training and her tragic losses. How, or maybe feel free to tell me if you think we've already talked about this question. How
Mhm.
did the idea and inspiration for Mia, someone who's so human in her mistakes but superhuman in her courage, come about?
I mean, she was born, like I say, in that scene,
Yeah.
in that argument that I saw on New Year's Eve between my two friends, which I very wisely stayed out of. They were kind of arguing the pros and cons of the use of the C bomb. And I just shut up and listened. It was a very interesting conversation to watch. And that, I mean, that was where she was born. I went away and thought about that and wrote that scene between her and Trick. I didn't even know
Mm,
who she was at that point. But at the end of that conversation, I wanted to know. So I wrote a book about her in order to kind of get to know her. And I'm not a very good planner. I don't, as a writer, I tend not to know where I'm going when I write. I tend to discover the story and often the characters in the story in the act of writing them. So Mia was kind of a really organic construction. I kind of came to know her as I wrote the things that happened to her and the events that shaped her. She
right.
the original draft of Nevernight had, I think, about 80,000 words that got cut from the final draft.
Wow.
I tend to start my books in the wrong place. I did that with Nevernight as well. I spent a lot of time on her childhood,
Mm,
like I say, about 80,000 words, and that all got cut. But it wasn't time wasted because in exploring her origins and her childhood,
mm,
I kind of got to know who she was. But she grew up as a product of violence. In those 80,000 excised words, she lived with an awful uncle, and
mm,
went through a lot of childhood trauma, and that kind of shaped the character that she was. And even though
right.
that trauma got erased from the text, it still informed the character that she grew up to be.
Right. Okay. So the hidden backstory,
Yeah, I
basically,
mean, and
essentially.
you can't rely on hidden backstory. Hopefully, I explored adequately why she became the person that she became. I just didn't go into it in as much detail. But
80,000 words less.
yeah, it would have been a lot thicker book. But like I said, it
Okay.
wasn't time wasted because I got to know who she was. I got a feel
Right.
for who she was and how she talked and how she thought. And it was really important to me that even though she grew up in some pretty awful circumstances and she was surrounded by some pretty awful people and ultimately motivated by selfish ends, she still maintains some semblance of morality. There's
Yeah.
things that she won't do. There's lines that she won't step across, even though she's, a murderer. Uh, yeah, there's still a core of
Yeah.
goodness to her, hopefully. And I kind of have fun exploring where the limits of that morality is and how the forces around her are kind of trying to erode it as the story goes on.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so all genres have their shares of female stereotypes and tropes. How do you break stereotypes in to create a female character that has agency while dealing with the world around her, which obviously includes situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Um, I mean, I try and I guess the first step is to be aware of those stereotypes.
Mm,
If you're not aware of them, you can't avoid them.
yeah.
I mean, I guess it comes down to reading widely and exposing yourself to a lot of different media and understanding where those stereotypes and tropes exist and why. Uh,
Mm,
Once you're aware of them, like I say, you can avoid them or subvert them. I
yeah.
often I often call out the sexism or misogyny in text a lot of the time. I think there's a scene in Nevernight where someone calls Mia, I think he calls her a whore, or a slut, or some kind of sexist, sex laden comment,
Hmm.
and she intercepts him and says, you know, "What's next, bitch?" or slut or whore or whatever. She kind of jumps in front of it and calls him out on it, and disarms him immediately by using that same language. So yeah, I try and hang a hat on it in text when I can. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very violent world.
Yeah.
So there isn't specific violence against women. It's just violence against everybody, because it's kind of, it's epic fantasy, and it's a school for assassins, and people are dropping left and right. But certainly that gendered commentary and that sexist line of thinking, I try and intercept and call out in text. There's the first scene in the book, uh, Mia loses her virginity and kills a man in the same chapter, and she has a conversation with the guy that she slept with, um, because he tells her afterwards that he didn't know she was a virgin, and why didn't she tell him?
Mm,
She basically says, because it's none of your business, and I'm not some gift to be held, and I'm not some flower that's now forever spoiled. So she confronts it as much as she can in the text, and has those conversations. So I think, yeah, that's the way I try and deal with it.
mm,
Have the characters exposed to it, have them react to it, have them explain, why they don't see the world that way, and have conversations about it in text. I mean, that passage that I read is basically calling out that gendered mode of thinking. The idea that the C bomb is the worst insult in the world it's an extraordinary sexist thought, that somehow female genitalia is more offensive than male genitalia. It's ridiculous. There's so much sexism laden in that simple thought that,
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty hard to unpack. But yeah, I mean, writing her, was a really good opportunity for me to kind of explore those thoughts in and of myself. And like I say, I have some pretty smart ladies reading for me, so some conversations come out of those reading sessions, that are really enlightening for me as well. So yeah, Mia's been very good for me.
Glad to hear that. Um, do you mind if we go back to the excerpt you just read?
Sure.
Now, to many people, a female protagonist should ideally adhere to this feminine stereotype and expectations, no matter how strong they're supposed to be. And I use strong with,
Yeah.
going back to the excerpt from that you just read, Mia definitely defies that whole sugar and spice and everything nice stereotype. Neither does she seem to have much teen angst. And the plus point, she cusses like a sailor too. So, do you get any flack for not portraying your characters as, unwaveringly feminine, good, and uplifting, and like the moral compass for the male protagonist of the story?
No, but I mean, a lot of my readers, I couldn't give you the exact figure. I would guess somewhere between 80 and 90% of my readers are women. So that, I mean, I hope they enjoy the fact that she breaks that kind of delicate flower feminine stereotype. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them, but hopefully they do. But no one's ever really called me out on it, which is, hopefully that's a sign that that kind of thinking is changing and going away, or maybe just I have some very smart people who read my books and haven't had to deal with any assholes basically. But no, it's um it's not something that I've been called out on. Hopefully people enjoy it. Hopefully people enjoy the fact that she does break those stereotypes. I mean, I think she's still a feminine character. She's certainly femme in terms of the way she looks, and
Yeah.
the way she conducts herself. There are certainly feminine aspects to her personality. I didn't want to just make a man in a woman's body. I see that happen quite a lot in epic fantasy. So yeah, she's still a woman. She still has, you know, female desire and sees the world as a woman. But
Mm.
you know, the truth is that the world she's grown up in is an awful one, and she's been exposed to some pretty awful parts of it. So she's had to, just by dint of survival, she's had to develop some pretty thick armor and some sharp edges to her to stay alive. So
Okay. Thanks for that. I think it's quite interesting that she does have the feminine qualities, but is not a typically feminine girl.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
she's. I mean, yeah. I don't even really know what a typically feminine girl is anymore. But
You and me both.
yeah, sure. Uh, but yeah, hopefully she walks that line. She's still a convincing female character, but she's not about pretty dresses and
Yeah.
plaiting her hair and staying up all night talking about boys. She's got more important things to talk about than boys.
Okay. Thanks for that. This the last part of this one very long question. Sorry. There's been an influx of more capable and strong female characters in fantasy, especially young adult fantasy.
Yeah,
I guess they're calling it the Hermione effect.
sure.
What are your what are your thoughts on this? And did this influence you in any way when you created your female characters? And just as a disclaimer, I'm not a big fan of saying strong female characters. I think
Mm,
that should eventually just be a strong character because we all know that female characters are as strong as they need to be
yeah,
without needing that extra emphasis on saying strong. But for the people around here who still haven't got the memo, yeah, that was my question.
yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying about strong female character. I think, you know, that's kind of a reaction to a very long and checkered past where female characters, particularly
Mm,
in male written, male centric epic fantasy, female characters were kind of regaled to. Uh, they were kind of pushed into the background and
yeah.
didn't really serve much narrative function or have any narrative agency. I think the Hermione effect, that's a great term. I've never actually heard that before, but actually a really good way of thinking about it. For a lot of readers, for particularly the generation of readers that read my work, Hermione probably would have been the first character of that ilk that they were ever exposed to. So
Yeah.
thank you, Joe Rowling. But also, I think the great thing about working in YA in particular is, you know, it's an industry where most of the authors are women, and so it's not a genre, but it's a demographic that
Mm,
is almost entirely populated by female writers, and so it's a really great place to explore those new perspectives. You know, typically fantasy in particular has been dominated by male authors and male points of view for a very long time. So
mm,
it's
yeah.
it's really interesting working in a space where I'm in the minority, and you know, being exposed to different ways of thinking and different ways of looking at the world.
Yeah. And again, comes back, it's quite interesting that when you say you're a minority, because I guess I'll go to the next question. You're a male author who's writing in the female voice, essentially.
Yeah, yeah,
And in fantasy, that's not common, and there's not a big um, spectrum of female authors in fantasy as well. I think we talk about Robin Hobb, Lynn Flowering, to name a few, but it's dominated by the male population, and it's only now slowly, I think, opening up its doors for female authors. So
yeah,
it's quite interesting for me that we actually have authors like yourself who not just write in the female voice, but also, or sorry, not write in the female voice, but have um, female protagonists as the main character, obviously, but also promoting that. I mean, most of your books, you have, for lack of better terms, a strong female character in it, so
sure.
that's great. We just got a comment from one of the viewers, Nick's Goddess. She's just commented. She said Mia is a great character.
Thanks. I'm glad you enjoy it.
And we've got in the next question, we had this conversation in the green room, just how in the past we've had male Read for Pixel authors talk about how they found it difficult to write female characters.
Mhm.
And even Brandon Sanderson, who just recently took part for the Read for Pixels at the start of September, talked about having to work on breaking out of writing women as stereotypes.
Sure.
And coincidentally, in January this year, you on Twitter you tweeted about how you were asked why are all the main characters in your books female, and you said that you get asked this question a lot and mostly by dudes.
Yeah.
It's a really odd question. So let's talk about that. Why do you find it comfortable writing interesting female protagonists with plenty of agency?
Uh, I don't know. I do get asked that question a lot, and it's often by men. I find it very strange because of all the kinds of characters that I write, uh, asking me how hard it was to write a girl, considering that I write murderers and soldiers and police officers and
Yeah,
insane artificial intelligences and all these things that I've never been and never will be. I find it odd that that's the one thing that I get asked about time and time again.
that's right.
And I don't know whether it speaks to. I suspect part of it at least speaks to people being afraid of screwing it up, getting it wrong.
Right. Okay.
Um, a lot of the guys who ask me that question are probably aspiring writers themselves, and they think there's some kind of alchemy involved, some kind of magic spell. Writing a woman is like writing a unicorn or a dragon or something. Where I try and center all my characters in human thought, human
Yeah.
motivation. Mia, she's a girl, but ultimately her motivations are anger and love. She loved her family and they were taken away from her, and
Yeah.
she wants to avenge herself on the people who did that. Those are human motivations. They're not necessarily female motivations. The way she reacts and the way she conducts herself are informed by her femininity, but at the core of her, she's driven by human drives. That's where I try and center all my characters. But yeah, the idea that there is some special alchemy involved in writing a female character, it's a very odd thought to me. It's I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch, but it's no more difficult than writing, say, a soldier in a frontline combat position who's
Yeah.
having their lives put in the hands of others and asking the same of their comrades around them. I've never done that. I can only imagine what that is like. But it's a matter of reading and having conversations and observation, and that's the same with writing anything. It's the same with writing female characters. It's the same with writing anything that you have not ever been and will never be. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and I find it interesting that I get asked that more than any other question. Pretty much, why do you write girls? Not why do you write so many murderers? There's just murderers in everyone.
When there are so many murders.
Um,
Well, well, women, we are magical creatures, so
yeah.
it takes a special kind of man to be able to write us.
Oh, sure. I'm a special. That's great. I'll tell my wife.
We've got another question that from Shen from England, Milky Bucket. She said, "Please ask Jay who are some of his inspirations or favorite writers."
My favorite writers. I grew up kind of in reading that epic fantasy doorstopper books. That was kind of where I got my grounding as a nerd. So it's a little bit passe and cliche to say, but Tolkien was a huge influence on me. I still remember reading The Hobbit for the first time, and for the first time ever feeling like there was a book out there that had been written for me. It kind of ticked all my boxes and pressed all my buttons. It was the first time I realized that there were books out there for nerdy little kids like me. Stephen King was a huge early influence. My mother would take us grocery shopping, and she would drop me off at a newsagent, which was right next to the grocery store. And the newsagent had a big section of books down the back, and I would walk down. I would have been like 10 years old at the time. I would walk down to the back of the store and I would pick a Stephen King book up off the shelf and just sit in the aisle and read. And the owner never told me to get out, and he never told me that you're a 10-year-old kid, you shouldn't be reading Stephen King. And when my mum would come back after an hour shopping, I would take a bus ticket and hide it, mark my place in the page, and then hide my book at the back of the stack so no one would buy it in the intervening week. And then I would come back next week and reach the back of the stack and pull out my book and keep reading it. And Stephen King, he was kind of the first author that I understood conceptually as an author, as a brand. Like, not I like this book, but I like this writer. And seeing his name on a book would compel me to buy it. So he was a huge influence. Robin Hobb was a huge influence on me. She actually read Nevernight a couple of years back and said very nice things about it. And if you had told like 17-year-old Jay that one day Robin Hobb would read and like and blurb his book, he would have asked you what drugs you were on. That was amazing. I've still got my first editions of Live Ship Traders and the Farseer trilogy up on the shelf behind me. So yeah, she was a huge influence on me as well.
Oh, wonderful. I'm a big Robin Hobb fan as well. I mean,
Amazing.
those books, the Farseer books, they just kill you.
Have you read Live Ship? The Live Ship Traders?
I've read all the books.
Okay, great. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I like Live Ship better than Farseer, which puts me. I think I'm a bit of an outlier on that one, but yeah, she's an amazing writer and an awesome person as well. So.
I finally read the last book last year. Was it last year? Early this year, the final book in the Tawny Man trilogy, and I was like,
sure.
Okay, you've just they put your hand in my chest and pulled out my heart, still beating.
That right.
Yeah. So Nick's Goddess has just commented. She said, in response to your previous comment about how people ask you more about why you like to write women as opposed to, why do you like to write murderers?
Sure.
She said, people apparently understand murderers more than women.
Yeah, I guess. That says a lot about our attitudes towards violence in society.
I know, right? Yep. So we move on to the next question. Do you have any tips and suggestions that you can share with male authors who want to do the same thing, like writing women, but are finding it tricky to break out of writing women as stereotypes?
Sure. Like I said before, I guess the first thing is to be aware of the stereotypes, the different character tropes. And, there's nothing inherently wrong with tropes. They exist for a reason.
Yeah.
And, certain tropes can be very helpful. But I guess the best way to break out of the mold is to understand where the mold is and where the edges of it are. So that's a matter of just reading and researching and educating yourself on the various constructs and tropes that we tend to lean back on time and time again. Have female beta readers. Have conversations with female writers. Read female writers. You'll tend to notice different sensibilities when books are written by a female rather than a man. To expose yourself to as much content created by women as you possibly can, and you'll begin to see patterns there. You'll begin to see resonances, and have female critique partners that you trust and whose opinions you respect and whose writing you respect. And learn to listen, learn to have those difficult conversations and understand that we all tend to fall into programmed lines of thought occasionally. So there's nothing wrong with it as long as you catch it before it gets published. That's fine. So I guess surround yourself by very smart ladies that are smarter than you.
I will refrain from the stories definitely passed the Bechdel test with their female characters focused on their mission or quest of relationships between women and girls.
Sure.
Why do you think so many science fiction, fantasy had trouble writing that test, despite the fact that there are so many more things that women talk about other than men for writers who want to write female conversations realistically?
The internet seems to be slowing down. I think I only caught the front half of that question. So could you repeat?
I'll repeat that.
Yeah, sure.
Why do you think many science fiction authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact things that women talk about other than men? And what can you suggest for writers who want to write the female conversations realistically?
I mean, I guess people keep falling into the trap because it was par for the course. It was the norm for a very long time.
Yeah.
We probably grew up reading and watching stories that did relegate female characters to secondary roles.
Yeah.
It's only natural that you emulate what you see. That's kind of how we learn as children. You see the world around you, you presume it's normal,
Yeah.
you emulate it. You have to be educated into the thought that, you know, that way of thinking, that way of seeing the world isn't optimal, and retrain yourself, I guess. So I
Mm.
presume it keeps happening because it has happened for so long. And unless you're aware of the pattern, you won't know to break it. You'll presume it's the norm. In terms of how to get out of it, I mean, simply be aware of it. The Bechdel test is a great litmus test for any piece of fiction that you're constructing.
Mm.
If you are aware of these norms, if you are aware of these stereotypes, if you are aware of these tropes, you can break them. As long as you're informed by these patterns, and as long as you're aware that you're being informed by those patterns, then you can, yeah, break out of them, and expose yourself to authors who have already successfully done that.
Yeah.
Read books by women, watch content made by women. That's usually a pretty good place to start.
Mm. Okay. We've got Milky Bucket. Has just said, "Thank you for asking him my question. Great stream and awesome guy." So,
Oh, thanks.
we've got another question from one of our viewers. Bury Me in Books has asked, "Have you ever considered stepping into other genres, horror, contemporary, etc.?"
Yeah, I have. The first novel I actually wrote was a horror novel, and like I said about Stephen King, I've been reading horror since I was 10 years old. I'm actually a big fan of it, but it's very hard to do, and it's very hard to sell. More importantly, the perception is that horror novels don't get read anymore. And because I write for a living, I kind of pay my mortgage with the money that I make from that book, but I have to be a little bit mercenary in the way I approach the content that I create.
Yeah.
But I wrote a horror short story for an anthology a couple of years ago, and that was a lot of fun. There's a part of me that will always be in love with horror. So while I might not write an overtly horror story, there are horror elements to something that I'm working on at the moment,
Right.
a secret project
Okay.
I'm beavering away on in the background. Contemporary is a different story. I'm astounded by contemporary writers. I think that's an incredible skill set, and I'm not entirely sure that I possess it. Writing a compelling story set in the real world, because I don't find the real world all that interesting. You know, when you're writing a science fiction novel or a fantasy novel, if things get boring, you can just blow something up or drop a dragon into the mix or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't do that in a contemporary story. So I'm very jealous of contemporary writers and their ability to tell an evocative and compelling story in a world that's entirely mundane. I'm not entirely sure I possess that skill set. Maybe I'll give it a try one day. But horror, definitely, yeah. Yeah, but my first love is sci-fi fantasy. That's what I grew up reading. They were the books that spoke to me when I was younger. They're the books that speak to me now. So um, I think it's only natural that I kind of gravitate to the thing that I love best.
Cool. Okay. So, any more questions? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go back to my questions. There, although there are some misogynistic characters in your books and storylines featuring violence against women, the male-female relationships between the main characters are generally quite equitable, and the male heroes and supporting characters are respectful of women, their thoughts and decisions. You also routinely turn quite a lot of male-female relationship tropes on their head. For example, having Trick fall in love with Mia for her own feisty, foul-mouthed, single-minded self, and having your female characters rescue your male characters in distress. So, do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways science fiction and fantasy authors can break away from the toxic tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the artist's responsibility not only to reflect the world that they see,
Hmm.
and the problems in that world, but paint the world that they want to see as well. We're really careful, for example, in the Illuminae universe, Amy and I, when we work together,
Yeah.
where we construct a future that we want to see. One where, where
One
content
way.
and quality have changed quite radically, to
Yeah.
the world that we're living in now. But yeah, it goes back to what I was saying before. I think we tend to emulate what we see. We tend to
Yeah.
look at the world around us and presume that it is normal unless we're told otherwise. So,
Yeah.
as artists constructing worlds where those barriers and stereotypes are being torn down, and those ways of thinking are being challenged in tech, yeah, it is a really good way to open people's eyes to the idea that this isn't the best way we could be living. This isn't the best world we could be living in.
Yeah.
By establishing a new normal, that hopefully, anyway, influences people's thinking in a positive way.
I like that, establishing a new normal.
Yeah, hopefully, you paint the world you want to see, and not every piece of art needs to be a critique. Not every piece of art needs to be overly political. But it's something that I try and do in my writing anyway. I try and construct worlds that I would want to live in, or if there are things about this world that I don't like, I try and challenge it in text as best I can. I don't want to be an author who's up on a soapbox. I think it's a very good way to turn readers off as soon as they think that you're a writer with an agenda,
Mm.
that you're telling them how to think. Most people are reluctant. I'm certainly reluctant to read an author like that. I'm not trying to tell people what to think. I'm trying to get people to ask questions,
Mm.
about the way they think, and if they draw their own conclusions, that's great. As long as I've got you thinking, then I think I've succeeded in my role as an artist.
Fantastic. Oftentimes, the line between consent and coercion isn't always very clear in fantasy books, whether it's epic fantasy or urban fantasy or paranormal romance. Do you think this is an issue that writers in the genre have started successfully tackling in recent years?
I think so. Yeah. There's actually a scene. There's a scene in Nevernight, a sex scene where Mia kind of stops halfway through, and tells the boy no, not tonight, pretty much. And I wasn't even consciously thinking of it at the time. But
Mm.
it wasn't until after the book had got published and a couple of my female friends came up to me and told me they really appreciated that scene. The fact that she told him to stop, not tonight, and he just stopped, and that was
Yeah,
the conversation. Well, they had a laugh about it. It wasn't the end of the conversation, but it was the end of the event. And that actually kind of rocked me back on my heels a little bit. I hadn't even thought that was a noteworthy event. Maybe I just got raised right, but that, to me, that wasn't me hanging a hat on anything. It was just the kind of the natural flow of the scene.
yeah,
But yeah, I think, like I say, I think can art can paint the world the way you want it to be, and even though that scene was instinctive to me rather than me making a point. Hopefully, yeah, that's indicative of a more pervasive attitude out there in the world now. Yeah, I
yeah,
think there's some really important conversations going on in the world right now. There's
yeah,
pretty horrible, people being exposed, and some pretty dark and deep seated
yeah,
attitudes that are coming to light. And yeah, I think having those discussions is a really important first step anyway,
yeah,
towards changing people's attitudes.
yeah.
Sunlight is a disinfectant is the saying that gets thrown around a lot. By shedding light on the topic, having these conversations, yeah, that's a really important first step. So
Yeah.
reflecting that in the art that we create is really important.
We'll just then, from that comment of yours, we're just going to go to the next bit because I think those two kind of feed into each other.
Sure.
Do you think that eventually the violent alpha male type character would phase out of science fiction and fantasy as cultures worldwide start kicking out toxic masculinity, or do you think it's one of those stereotypes that are going to be sticking around for much longer than expected?
I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by alpha male.
I think when we're talking about the violent ones, not alpha male, as you know, like sometimes you've got the paranormal romance books and the urban fantasy where you've got alpha male characters who are still ultimately respectful towards women, but
Sure.
we're talking about the violent ones that think or treat women as their property, as chattel,
Yeah,
and who are violent and possessive and abusive, essentially.
yeah. I mean, hopefully so. I mean, there's a fine line between um, strong-willed and um, yeah, dominant, I guess, and violent.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure the idea of a dominant male character will ever go away.
yeah,
I mean, character compelling characters need to have agency. Then Mia is a dominant character. She knows what she wants. She knows how to get it, and she goes and takes it, regardless of whether the character is male or female. I don't think that's going to go away. But yeah, I mean, hopefully the idea that kind of violence is okay will go away. I mean, the characters existing and being called out for it, or being shown that there's a different way of conducting yourself or thinking, that can serve a role in text. Yeah, so hopefully so. Hopefully, as attitudes change and our ways of viewing the world change, the art that we create that reflects that world will change as well.
yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Um, all right, we'll go to the next question. Are you okay
Yeah,
with
sure.
all the questions? Just checking in on you. Okay, so stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about change. In your opinion, how can authors strike a balance in their storytelling between raising awareness about violence against women while still telling an engaging story without being preachy or pedantic?
Yeah, it is really tough. Like I say, readers tend to recoil when they feel like they're being spoken at, when
Mm,
they feel like the artist is trying to preach from a pulpit, I guess.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a hard line to walk, and I'm not entirely sure whether I successfully walk it even, or how I do it. But yeah, I think the way I go about it is to tell the story that I want to tell, and then show it to other people. You tend to get quite blinkered when you're working on your own. Being an author is a pretty solitary and lonely occupation, and you tend to get quite blinkered in your way of thinking when you've been looking at a story too long. So, I guess the best
Right.
way to do it is to, once you feel like that story is in a comfortable place, show
Mm,
it to other people, show it to people who are different to you, show it to people who in some way reflect the world that you're in or the characters that you've constructed, and have them critique it. But
yeah.
yeah, it's a really fine line to walk, and it's really hard to know where that line is. I guess it depends on your intent as an author. Uh, if it's your intent to teach a lesson when you go into your work, and
Mm,
there's nothing wrong with that intrinsically. But I guess, yeah, be aware that some people
yeah.
tend to recoil from any story or any piece of art where they feel like they're being told how to think. Like I say, I strive to reach a point where people are just thinking. I'm not trying to tell people what to think. I'm just trying to ask them to think at all.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily trying to get them to draw any particular conclusion, but as long as they're drawing their own conclusions, then I think I've achieved that goal. But every writer is different. Every book serves a different purpose. There are some really important books being written right now that are speaking to points about
Yeah.
inequality, be they racial or sexual. There are books that are being written right now that are about the current political climate, and those are important, and those messages are overt.
Yeah.
So that those books are trying to achieve a different job than perhaps my work is. I'm not constructing overly political works. I'm writing science fiction, fantasy, and like I say, trying to reflect the world in which I want to live. But my goals as an artist are different to someone who's going out there with an overt message. So, though, yeah, those kinds of books are still very important.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you kind of answered my next question, which was, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and as human beings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I think it's what I try and do is to show the world as I want it to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm working in a fantasy or a science fiction setting, so these are analogs that I'm creating. But yeah, I try and show the world that I want to live in.
Right. Okay.
That's the goal, anyway.
Let's go. How do you think stories that explore the theme of empowered persons in their own right and men should respect women can help stop violence against women?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So,
My internet is a little bit dodgy. I think I'm all over that in Australia.
all right, okay. Possibly mine too, because I'm also in Australia.
Oh,
How
okay.
do
Sorry.
how do you think stories that explore the theme that women can be empowered in persons in their own right and men should respect women can help to stop violence against women?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's. I guess it's leading by example.
Mm,
It's trying to show the world that you want to live in. I guess, like I say, people tend to emulate what they see. People tend to
yeah,
accept what they see as normal, unless that mode of thinking is challenged. So by creating art in which these healthy relationships exist, or these problems are examined in text, you're challenging the perceptions and stereotypes and constructs that people have presumed is the norm up till that point. So yeah,
yeah,
again, it comes back to kind of creating the world that you want to see, or challenging the world as it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, in your opinion, as a novelist, how important is it to have strong? Well, you know what? You've already answered this question, so I'm just going to skip that.
Sure.
Um, geek culture in general, which includes science fiction and fantasy, has had its share of critics saying that it's still too male dominated. We just had that conversation, despite a rising number of prominent, well respected, and well known female authors. Plus, there's still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female
Sure.
geeks. What, in your opinion, do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books, more welcoming for women and girls?
Um, yeah. Geek culture is it's a really interesting place. Star Wars is a pretty great example
Yeah.
of that right now. There seems to be almost a civil war going on in Star Wars fandom right now. People like the old stuff, people who like the new stuff, people who hate the new stuff because it's new, and people who hate the new stuff because they feel like they're being, like I say, preached to.
Mm,
I don't. I guess the best way to deal with that kind of behavior is to call it out. The best way to evoke change is to try and lead by example. I mean, at least in young adult, we're getting to a much better place, because there are a lot of female content creators in the space.
yeah.
There are a lot of really important conversations happening as a result of that. And I think, as we get more female creators into a wider space, and we're certainly seeing that now, both in terms of the people creating the content and who the characters that the content is dealing with,
Yeah.
then we'll get to a better place. Wonder Woman is probably the most successful film of the DC franchise so far. The Captain Marvel movie is coming out.
That
I think
looks pretty awesome too.
this year, next year. I don't know what the
I
release.
think it's next year.
I mean, the problem with Marvel, I mean, interestingly enough, DC does have kind of a paragon female figure in Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
She's a character that was established, like 60, 70 years ago. And she's been
Yes,
a lot of
that's right.
different iterations, but as an iconic character, she
Yeah.
exists in kind of the zeitgeist of geek culture. Marvel doesn't really have an analog for Wonder Woman. Like there is no, they're trying to establish it now with Captain Marvel, I think, but there is no paragon figure in the Marvel canon that is a equivalent to Wonder Woman.
To Wonder Woman, that's
Mm.
right. You're absolutely right.
Marvel kind of never picked up that ball. You think about probably the four most iconic superheroes you could think of on the top of your head: Batman, Superman,
Wonder
Spider-Man,
Woman.
Wonder Woman. They would be
That's right.
the four. Three of them are DC.
That's true.
One of them is female. But yeah, Marvel doesn't have. They have an interesting job ahead of them, trying to create Captain Marvel and turn her into an iconic character the same way that Wonder Woman is, given that Captain Marvel doesn't exist in popular consciousness the way Wonder Woman does.
That's right.
Will be really interesting to watch, but I think it's great that they're trying.
Yeah.
And Captain Marvel herself is a really interesting character to try and do that with. So
Yes, definitely. I always liked Captain Marvel, but mainly because I used to love the X-Men and
right,
how Rogue got powers and stuff like
I
that.
mean,
So just yes, exactly. So having that correlation there, I'm looking forward to it, but I get what you mean about the whole Marvel universe making that one tiny mistake because they don't have one strong female character. But at the
yeah,
same time, when you read their comics or you watch the movies that they are churning out, what I found really good is that they have multiple very, very formidable female characters,
yeah.
but there's not one that you can look like Wonder Woman that you can look and go, yeah, I want to, that's my role model right there,
Yeah.
because there's none.
They don't. They don't have that kind of tier one female character in terms of power level, I guess.
Yeah,
One woman can toe to toe Superman.
that's right.
But Marvel, they never really did it. I mean, that was one of the reasons I loved X-Men. And I only knew about Captain Marvel because of Rogue, because
Same.
Rogue killed Captain Marvel and absorbed her powers. That was my first exposure to
That's
Captain
right.
Marvel.
Well, she didn't kill her. She put her in a coma for many, many years, and then she woke up eventually.
Yeah, but I mean, like X-Men was a
Yeah.
great example. Like they had iconic female characters. They had Rogue, they had Storm, they had Jubilee, they had Shadowcat. They had
They
an
had
amazing
such amazing
cast of
characters.
female characters. And it's really weird that the Marvel universe, on a wider spectrum, never really picked that up and ran with it. Like the X-Men comics seemed to be the only space that was really doing it and doing it successfully. Like
Yeah.
Storm was leader of the Uncanny X-Men after Uncanny X-Men, the original wave dropped out. I mean, the original wave only had Miss Marvel, one female character out of 5, which wasn't great. But the new wave of X-Men, Storm was an incredible character. She was one of my favorite X-Men of all time.
Oh yes, definitely. My favorite X-Men was always Rogue,
I
because
loved Rogue as well.
I found her so complex and
Yeah, the idea. I mean, that idea that you can't touch anyone. Like
know.
your power is a curse. That has always been a really interesting construct to me. The idea that you pay a price for your power. Superman
That's right.
he just runs around and flies, and he's invulnerable, and he can punch you into orbit, and he doesn't really pay a price for his power. Whereas
That's right.
Rogue does. Like she has this gift, but it's also a curse that
A curse, exactly.
she was probably the most interesting X-Men in that respect. She was an awesome character. She's one of my favorites as well.
Me too. I just absolutely loved her.
That's something that I try and put into my work as well. Like the idea that you pay price for power, that it doesn't come for free. Mia, for example, she can turn invisible, but when she turns invisible, she goes blind. She can't see the world, just like the world can't see her. And I think that that's me harkening back to the idea of a character like Rogue, that with your power comes a hindrance as well. So you can do
Yeah,
amazing things, but there's a price to be paid for it. Yeah. Sorry, I geeked out
that's
a
right.
bit there.
No, don't worry. I don't know if you can see. I've got my Wonder Woman picture right up
Oh yeah,
there,
yeah, amazing.
and then I've got this Trinity right there, and I've got another Wonder Woman picture that's flat because my daughter pushed it um um off the shelf. But yeah, I'm a total comic geek,
Yeah,
so.
sure. Did you like the Wonder Woman movie?
Oh, I loved it. When they first cast that character, I was like, oh, she doesn't look like Wonder Woman at all. I was picturing someone, you know, like how the comic books are, but I loved it. I actually watched it twice. I went and watched it twice when I was 32 weeks pregnant.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So, yes, loved it. And I'm looking forward to the next one. I thought they
Yeah, I
did
thought
a
Gail Gadot
fantastic.
was amazing. She did such a
Yes,
great job. Like,
amazing. That's right.
yeah, she is iconic, particularly in Justice League, which wasn't a great movie.
Put it nicely.
But she was
She
amazing.
stole the show.
Like,
Yeah. And that's why
yeah, she's
I
extraordinary.
I told my husband, I said, you know what? Even Gadot could not save that movie, but
No,
she was good to watch. So
great. But yeah, that was an incredible piece of casting.
yeah, I thought that was the best. I think the best DC casting since Christopher Reeve, I have to say.
Yeah, I miss Chris Reeve. I think
Oh,
like
me
Henry
too.
Cavill is a pretty good Superman, but he's just working with some really bad material.
Oh, that's putting it nicely again.
Yeah, he's just
That's why you're the author.
super angsty. I'm not entirely sure Zack Snyder gets what the id of Superman is. Like trying to turn him into a grimdark Superman
Yeah,
robs him of his essence. I think he's supposed to be a Boy Scout.
that's. I know. I think at the end of the day, Zack Snyder just should not be directing any of these superhero movies. Let's just put it that way.
He's
I
got
mean,
he's got a wonderful eye. I thought the job he did on Watchmen was amazing. I think Watchmen's an
yes,
incredible movie.
those kind of movies, yes. But I think when it comes to Superman and the Justice League, he kind of missed the mark, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think like Batman as a grimdark character works. Like the Dark Knight as a persona of Batman works.
That's right.
As a general rule, the Justice League, tonally, they're a little bit goofy. They're a little bit campy.
That's right.
And I've done that with the Avengers. Like the Avengers, even the color palette in Avengers is extraordinarily bright, and everyone's cracking wise and making jokes. And Justice League just seemed to go in the exact opposite direction
Opposite
for some reason.
direction.
I guess to try and differentiate themselves from Marvel, but
They
it
missed the mark.
yeah, it just doesn't work. It only works with
Yeah.
Batman. Batman can be emo, but
That,
everyone
yeah.
else needs to be emo.
That's right. I like that. Batman is emo. I mean,
Yeah,
he's emo
but that's what we love
personified.
about him, right?
um, I just got a comment here um, from Regina. She said, the toxic fanboys are whining about the Captain Marvel trailer. Apparently, Brie Larson is not smiling enough in the trailer.
She's supposed
But
to be a badass. What's she got to smile about?
she's saving the world. But
That's just a
Brie
dog.
Larson's awesome. I think she's an awesome feminist. So she's apparently gone and photoshopped all the other superheroes, Marvel superheroes, the male ones, smiling.
Oh, right.
So I think she's got it
Amazing.
sorted out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think anyone working in that space nowadays, you're going to cop flack from those angry fanboy dudes.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a conversation online not so long ago where people were going nuts about She-Ra, the reimagining of,
Oh yes, that's
um,
right.
and you're talking about a 30-year-old cartoon property. No one, yeah, the things that people choose to get angry about on the internet astound me
Mm,
every day. But as long as I guess it sounds like Brie Larson is more than aware that that particular kind of fan exists. As long as she's aware and prepared to tackle them head on, like
that's right.
Godspeed, Godspeed.
I think there's been a lot of upset because a lot of the iconic characters, let's say, it have been reimagined with females in it. Like I think Thor was reimagined as a female character, and then
Wolverine.
the Ghostbusters, the remake was all for females, and even Doctor Who. So it's like,
Yeah,
why are you taking our space? You feminazis are coming in and taking our space, and it's like, not really. It's just appealing to a different audience
sure.
and getting with the era, you know. Gone are the times when it's just men who are superheroes. Now women are also superheroes, and we can do what men do, pretty much.
Sure. I mean, particularly when you're talking about superheroes, yeah. Wonder Woman can punch people into orbit. So
That's right.
yeah.
Batman can stare at you until you get scared and glass you into submission. Um, all right, we've geeked out a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna wrap up and come to the last couple of questions.
sure.
You have been so incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. This might be a no-brainer for you, but I have to ask this question.
Sure.
Why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Um, I mean, violence is the last refuge of cowardice. I mean, I was raised in a house where that kind of thinking, that kind of attitude was simply unacceptable. My father set some wonderful examples for me as a young man, and taught me that was never okay. Uh, so yeah, it's an abhorrence. I mean, violence of any sort is an abhorrence. So anything that we can do to end any kind of violence against any kind of
Mm,
person is extraordinarily important. We've got an endeavour down here in Australia, the White Ribbon
yeah.
campaign, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've got this on my wrist. I've worn it
Oh,
for like 3 or 4 years. I've been wearing it so long, it's actually just all worn away. It just looks like a black um, rubber band on my arm now. But yeah, anything that we can do to stop any kind of violence against any kind of person is important.
yeah.
Particularly of a kind of violence that is so extraordinarily prevalent and has been normalized for so many years. I mean, like I say, I was really fortunate in the house that I grew up in. It wasn't normal.
Mm,
I
yeah.
was taught at a very young age that kind of behavior was never okay, and it was kind of confronting to me as a young man growing up and being exposed to the idea that it was so prevalent for so long,
Mm,
because I hadn't grown up in a house like that. I hadn't grown up in a house where that was okay, and I hadn't been exposed to that kind of
yeah.
violence as a kid. So it was actually quite hard for me to wrap my head around at first, because the normal that I grew up in was a normal where that kind of thing wasn't all right. And so
Mm,
being exposed to people who thought it was really hard for me to wrap my head around at first.
yeah.
Um, but becoming aware that it was so prevalent and so accepted by so many people, yeah, that was tough. So yeah, anything I can do to lead by example, I will. I think my dad did a pretty great job with me, and yeah, hopefully, hopefully you can, like I say, you can lead by example. You can create the worlds that you want the world to be. And I don't want to be a person who preaches on a pulpit. I don't want to be a person up on a soapbox. But um, if I can, in some small way, in my work,
Mm,
reflect the world that I want to live in, then that that's something that I'll strive to do as long as I'm a content creator.
yeah. Fantastic. Um, and I guess you've just answered the next question, because I said my question was going to be, what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls? But I think you
Oh, yeah,
kind of answered that.
I think it's twofold. I think, first and foremost, we can be having these conversations, just like the conversation that you and I are having now. But not only conversations online, but conversations in personal space. I mean,
Yeah.
conversations online can often be kind of performative, I guess.
Yeah.
And having strangers online tell you how to think, it
Oh.
usually not a great way to get you to change the way you think. So I think it's important to have these conversations in private as well with your friends.
Yeah.
To call out behavior when you see it, and the way you can call it out. That's something you need to put a lot of thought into, because people generally don't like to be challenged in public, and they'll immediately become defensive. But yeah, having those conversations in private with your friends as well as online is
Mm,
really important. But that's one important aspect, having these conversations both in public and in private, but also secondarily, creating the world that you want to live in, reflecting the world that you want to be in the worlds that you create in your work. And whether you're calling it out overtly in text or simply having it, that normal that you want to exist in text. There's a number of different ways that you can do it, but building the world that you want to live in your work is another way that we can go about it.
Thank you for that. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
You've been so patient.
That's okay.
Last one.
I'm going to go to yard work in a minute, so the longer we can talk here, the longer I put off going out and working in the.
Is it cold there today?
No, it's actually a beautiful day. I shouldn't complain too much. It's
Okay.
going to be.
Yeah, it's pretty warm here today too. So I think I'll probably go for a walk after this.
Where are you? You in Sydney?
Adelaide. I'm in Adelaide.
Okay. All right. Hello to everyone in
Wine country.
Adelaide. Yeah, I love
Adelaide. One of the reasons violence against women exists is gender inequality. Do you think there will ever be a time when there will be complete equality between the genders? And it will follow, obviously, that when there's complete equality, there will be no more violence against a person just because she's female.
I certainly hope so. I don't know if it ever will. I don't have a crystal ball and I can't see the future, but I certainly hope it will. And I certainly think that conversations like this one and organizations like yours are a really important first step. So while I can't say how the future will shape out, it's certainly something that I'll strive to do in my personal life and my work, and we will see how it goes. We will fight a good fight and see where we all end up. But it's certainly something to strive for.
All right. Thank you so much, Jay, for your patience and for answering the multiple questions and for that excerpt. I am just going to do a bit of a wrap-up spiel.
Sure.
And so I'm going to unlock you from the... So, as mentioned at the beginning of this session, Jay has also very generously donated some goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixel Rally Up fundraising page. As I said earlier, the Nevernight goodie bundle and the Illumine goodie bundle have both already been snapped up by Eleanor Goodlett and our longtime Read for Pixels community member, Brianna Avery. We have one Lifelike goodie bundle with one Lifelike first edition hardcover book signed and personalized by Jay. And we have one set of 4 exclusive Lifelike bookmarks. All these goodies are available for US and Australia donors only. There's only one bundle left, and each one just has a modest donation request attached to it. So if you fulfill the donation request today, Jay will send you the goodies. Jay, before I continue, do you have any announcements you'd like to make? You did say that you have some books coming out next year.
Yeah, I guess I should talk about the new books, shouldn't I? I've got 3 books coming out next year. I don't have anything else coming out this year, but next year in April, we have Aurora Rising, which is the first part of my new sci-fi YA series with my partner in crime, Amy Kaufman. And then in May, I have the second part of the Lifelike trilogy coming out. And in September, I have Dark Dawn, which is the third part of the Nevernight Chronicle coming out. So I'm going to be pretty busy boy next year. And yeah, just want to say thanks to all my readers and all my supporters who let me do this amazing thing I do for a living. Because I couldn't do it without you. Will
you be touring at all, Jay, next year? Do you think you might? Yeah.
Yes. So we'll be touring the US on Aurora. I might be touring on Lifelike 2 as well. Dark Dawn were a little early days. I think I am 90% sure I'm going to be over in the UK when Dark Dawn drops. So I'll probably do a UK tour for that one. And hopefully I'll get around Australia as well, but I'm not entirely sure. We're a year out. So those kind of things get planned a little later in the stage. But we'll definitely be over in the States when Aurora Rising drops.
And the updates will be on your Facebook page, obviously.
Yep, Facebook and Twitter and
Twitter.
Instagram and all that stuff.
Yeah, cool. So keep abreast of Jay's books and tours next year. Just check out his social media. Keeps it pretty up to date.
I'm pretty good. Pretty good at that kind of thing.
Yes, you are.
My website's not so great, but my social media is okay.
Okay, so as you all know, so please give generously because all funds go towards Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. For those of you who are very disappointed that you didn't get to snap up the Nevernight and Illuminate series, don't worry, we've still got Jay's Lifelike bundle, and we have plenty of other author goodies available from authors which include Leigh Bardugo, Karen Rose, Aliette de Bodard, Jacqueline Carey, and much more. And new goodies are released every week as well as the campaign gets underway. And as we said before, all funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help violence against women. So I'm just going to screen share this slide for y'all to see. Yep. Okay. So if you want to donate for goodies via Rally Up, just head on over to http://is.gd/r4p Rally Up 2018. And to find out more about Read for Pixels, head on to http://is.gd/read4pixels. Hope everyone's got that. And if to find out more about violence against women and what you can do about it, you can visit our website, the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. And once again, to find out more about the celebrity male role model Pixel Reveal campaign, please visit http://reveal.thepixelproject.net to learn more about it. And please do donate generously to help us reveal pixels and raise the $1 million for the cause. Thank you, and hope you have a good day wherever you are in the world. And thank you again to our fantastic Jay Kristoff for being such a patient person and answering the multiple questions, and for supporting Read for Pixels and Pixel Project.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for having me. You guys do great work.
Thank you. And we are